everyone, I'm Allie with Potomac Beads. Join me in creating this Polaris bracelet featured in our January Best subscription box. Remember, if you do need any supplies or you want to check out the subscription box, click on the links below to shop with us online. Gather up all your supplies from your box or from the site and get ready to begin. To begin our Polaris bracelet, we have some 15Os here in the bezeling crystal, a 14mm cushion, tubelets in champagne, 4mm gemstones in Labrador, and then some 11Os in the topaz line crystal AB color. And I also have my cup button here for my clasp that I'll be using. And when creating the bracelet, we're going to be starting with the bezel in the center and then building on to the sides of the bracelet as well. So we are going to begin with our 15O, our tubelet, and our 4mm of our gemstone. I want you to do your first circle here basically, and it's going to turn into a square as we kind of corner it off. You're going to add one 15O, one 4mm bead, one 15O, and then one tubelet. We're going to repeat this 4 times, and I'm not holding, or I'm not letting go of the end of my thread. I'm using 0.006 Wildfire beading thread, and I have one of my size 12 needles on here and about 5 feet of thread. I'm going to go in and create this same design, again gathering it up 4 times. With the gemstones, sometimes you have to turn them around so you can see the end here. So there's 2. 2 more will go on, and then we'll get ready to square it off. After you have your 4 groups of your tubelet and 4mm round on, you're simply going to tie this into a loop or a square here. You want to make sure not to have your 15O bead attached in there and give a nice tight pull after 2 knots. From here, I'm going to remember that I ended with the tubelet, so I'm going to take my thread and needle through my 15O and my 4mm bead and my 15O, and then out through my tubelet. When I come out through my tubelet bead, that's when I'm going to add some of my 2mm Czech round in this ancient gold color. And we're going to add 3 to each of the corners with one of the 11O seed beads prior to it. So coming out the tubelet, 1 11O gets added, 1 and 2 and 3 of your 2mm, 1 more 11O. You're going to skip over your 15, 4, 15, and sew right in to the next tubelet. That's going to sit just kind of puffed out right there on the square. So go ahead and continue on. 11, 3 2s, and then 1 11 and through again. I'm going to do the rest of the 2 sides, and then what I'm going to do is get ready to do our back. So we have 2 more sides to add in those beads, and then we're going to start going through and coming out of the tubelet to do this netting along the back. The netting along the back will hold my cushion in place, and then we'll do more towards the front here to get that nice bezel set. For our next step, I'm coming out of the tubelet after doing the last grouping of 3 there. And when I'm coming out of my tubelet, I want to add 1, 2, 3 of my 15s, followed by 1 11, and then 1, 2, 3 of my 15s. I'm going to take my thread and needle back through that same tubelet bead and out. Now you want to make sure you're not catching on to any of your 15O seed beads as you're doing it. Coming over them, I'm going to go through my 15 gemstone 15 through my tubelet and do the same thing again. So because we're doing this squared effect, everything that we're doing, if you haven't caught on already, is happening in 4s. On go 3 15s, followed by 1 11, 3 15s, and then again back through that tubelet. 2 more have to happen, going through the 15, 4mm 15, and then through and on to the next tubelet. For our next step, we're going to continue with this netting, and I've gone through all of my tubelets, adding in my bead, and what I'm going to do is step up so that I'm coming out through the 11O seed bead in that triangle group that I just added. Coming out that 11O seed bead then, I'm going to catch on to all of the 11Os which are that topaz color. And I'm going to separate them out with 4 of my 15-0s. So I'm going to put on 4 15-0s, coming out my thread and needle, and then I'm going to go over to the next grouping of seed beads to the left, because my thread's coming out the left of that 11-0, and add in 4 seed beads. Make sure those go towards one side, because that's going to pull in there for your base of your bezel. 4 more go on, and again through the next 11-0 seed bead. You want to make sure also again that you're just going through the 11-0s as you add these 15s in place. 4 go on through the next 11, and again make sure these are all going to the same side to create that netting. 4 go on, and then as you add your final 4 here, I want you to go back through that first 11 that your thread was coming out of, as well as the next set of 15s and the next 11, so you can see there. This is going to get that bezel pulled tight, and you can see now you have that nice netted bezel. When we flip over and we have our cushion, it's going to sit pretty perfectly right in between there, and that's going to hold that netting in the back. As we flip over then to the front, we're going to come up the front and do some netting in the front as well. To do the netting in the front, we are going to come out our tubelets yet again. So when I'm coming out the back here, I'm coming down through my 1 11-0. I'm going to go down through the 15-0s that are after it next to the tubelet, and stepping down. And then once I'm through those 15-0 seed beads, I'm going to back through and come out through the tubelet. When I come out through the tubelet, I'm going to bring my needle and thread toward the front of the design in order to get ready to hold my cushion in place. Once you finish up that last step, we're coming out the tubelet, and instead of circling around the tubelet, we're going to go right over to the next tubelet. In between them, you're going to add 1 15, 1 11, one of your 2mm round, 11, and 15. So you're going from the smallest to the biggest. And then you're going to sew through that next tubelet bead and out. Once you're through that next tubelet bead, this is the netting that we're going to bring towards the center of the design to hold in our cushion bead. So again, 15 going from smallest to biggest, 11, and then your 2mm, then down again to an 11 and a 15. Over along the side here, going to the next tubelet bead and out, making sure that you're only going through the tubelet and that you're not connecting to any of the 15-0 seed beads. As you do so, bring that toward the front of the design. I have 2 more to go, and then we're going to come out through our first 2mm bead as we get towards the end of the design. Once you're done with all of your corners, again you want to come through your last tubelet and go up through the 15, 11, and 2mm and come on out. In between here then, you are going to catch on, just like we did for the netting, with the 2mm bead, and in between you're going to add one of your 11, 2mm 11, and then catch on to that corner 2mm bead. I'm going to do the first 2, and then I'm going to get my cushion ready to go so that way it'll sit in place prior to actually creating the entire bezel. So again, catching on to just that corner 2mm bead, sewing through. Now I'm ready to drop my cushion in there, and the cushion's going to sit pretty much on those 4mm beads. They'll kind of fan out to the end as you go around and pull these beads in. Again, 11 and a 2 and an 11 into the next corner bead. And a little advice, if you ever need to clean up the crystals, you can use just a tiny bit of Windex on a cloth. Don't spray it directly on the crystal because it's obviously next to beads, but you can put it onto a little bit of a cloth and rub it on the crystal just like glass, since it's glass. Through that first 2mm bead there, and then as I push my cushion down into the design, I'm going to pull my bezel tight. So make sure my cushion's sitting right and not on an angle. And once it's in there, and sitting correctly. Then I'm going to do my final pull. The next thing I'll do is go around one more time onto the piece and reinforce this center line, going through all the 11s and all the 2mm that sit at the top. Once you've gone back through that center row 2 times, you can see that nice bezel set, the crystal right in there, not going anywhere. And it also makes a great pendant or a pair of earrings. So think about this center as a component that you can add on to and you can enhance as well. What I'm going to do now is actually create sides using the tubelets and the 11s, and then also doing some right angle weave here as we go in to do these little corner connections. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to sew down through the piece here, and I'm going to go coming out of the 2mm bead back through the 11 and the 15, because whenever you sew back down the design, you always want to make sure that you don't see any extra thread. So remember, when I came out with that, I went through one of my tubelets, so I'm going to go through my tubelet next. And then over to the side. I'm going to go through my 11 and my first 2mm bead. That's going to put me on the side there. I'm going to go through my second 2mm bead, so I'm coming out the corner. As I come out the corner, I'm going to get ready to do basically a big section of right angle weave. To do this big section of right angle weave, first I'm going to do one side, attach the clasp, and then do the right angle coming back. So depending on your length of your wrist, you want to think about this being one side. After the 2mm bead, I'm going to put on one 11-0, one tubelet, one 11-0. And if you need to, my needle's a little bent, you can always go back in and straighten up your needles a little bit. Another tubelet. So I'm going to do 2 tubelets. Now you can make a variety of different ways to do your patterns. That's pretty much up to you. So from here, after the 2 tubelets, I'm going to do one 11-0. Then I need to grab out some more of my 2mm rounds. After the 2mm round, 15 4mm gemstone, 15 2mm round. Those 15s are going to make that 2mm round, or that 4mm round rather, sit out really nicely. From here, 11-0, tubelet, 11-0, tubelet. So I'm going to repeat this a second time till I get down ready for my clasp connection. When I get down here to the end, 11, then a 2, then a 15, then a 4. Oops, lost my 15. Again, 15, 2mm, or sorry, 2mm here, and then another 11. At my clasp now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up the design with my rotation of my 2 tubelets. So tubelet, 11, tubelet, another 11, and then I'm going to get ready to sew on my button. I have one of the Potomac cup buttons here, and I'm using it in the Lila Luster color. What I'm going to do, coming out that 11-0, is add on 2 more 11-0s, come out through the cup button. Coming out the front of the cup button, add one of your topaz color bead, 1 2mm, and 1 more 11. Come down through the button on the other side. Mirror this, so we're going to do 1, 2, and 3, or sorry, 2 11-0s. And I want you to go back through and reinforce. So we're going to go back through the last 2 11s right there, up through the cup button. At the same time you're going up the cup button, make sure to go up through the top. So you're doing 2 beads there. Go up through and reinforce. When you come out the back of the cup button then, also go down through those 2 beads again. Then add 1 more 11, and we're going to start coming back up the project. 1 11, 1 tubelet, 1 11, get some more tubelets out here. 1 more 11, and that's going to put me to the side here. What this is setting me up for then is my section here of my right angle weave that I'm going to do to make that fun little connection along the side. So along this side here, when I'm coming out, I have my 11, then I have my 2mm, 15, 4, 15, 2mm. And then instead of putting on my next 11 right away, I'm going to put on another section of my 4mm bead, which has a 15-0 on either side. I'm going to go over to the first side and sew through the 2mm bead, the 4mm bead, and come out the 2mm bead. Also sewing through those two first 15s. Once again, I'm going to add another 4mm bead. So I'm doing a 15-0 seed bead, 4mm bead, 15-0 seed bead, exiting through that 2 on the right, and I'm going to come down through the left-hand side, then go down through that 2mm, 15-0, and then your 4mm bead. You want to come out your 4mm bead, and tighten that up. What I'm going to do now is catch on to all of my 4mm beads. This is going to tighten it up to get that nice right angle unit. Add one 11-0, sew through the next 4mm bead. Push that 11 toward the center. One more 11, sew through the next 4mm bead. Now if you know right angle weave, you can do this all right away at the start, connecting this to it, rather than coming down the piece and then back up the piece. That's up to you. Once you have your last 4mm bead that you've caught onto and added your last 11-0, you're going to be coming out your 4mm crystal or your 4mm Labrador there. I want you to also go through the 15 after it, and then as well up through your 15, or sorry, up through your 2mm bead. Once you're out through your 2mm bead, it's the same thing on repeat. So 11, tubelet, 11, tubelet. After finishing up and adding the 11 tubelet, 11 tubelet after coming out of the 2, we're going to get ready to do our next right angle weave again. Remember, it's one 11-0, and then after that 11-0, you're going into the 15, then 2mm, then your 15, then your 4mm, and this is your first 4mm. We're going to add another 15 and a 2, and then instead of continuing up with the design, which you can do too if you want to keep it nice and simple, we're going to do one more section there of that right angle weave. So I want you to add one of your 15s and your 4mm bead, and then you're going to add another 15. Go over to the opposite side here, catch on to the 2mm, the 15, the 4mm, the 15, the 2mm, and out. Again, we need one more of our 4mm bead with a 15, 4mm, and then another 15. Once you have those on, you're going to sew back through the 2mm and the 15 and the 4mm. When we have that on there, then we'll get ready to add our 11-0 seed bead between each one of our 4mm beads. After finishing up connecting your 11-0 or your 4mm beads with your 11-0 seed beads, just like we did previously, you're going to come out of your 2mm bead and then add your 11s and your tubelets, and then we're going to go to the other side and do the exact same thing. To get to the other side, we're going to sew through the 2mm bead, the 1 11-0, right on through the tubelet. Give it a little shake if you need to. And then on the other side, back down through the 11 and through the 2mm beads. This sets me up to repeat the same exact design on the other side to make my nice bracelet catch there in the middle. From here, what I'm going to do after I get down to the other side is I'm going to join you as I go in and get my first side done to do my loop for my button. Once you're finished up with side number 1, as you go to the other half of your bracelet, you're going to want to put about 28 seed beads after your last tubelet bead. I'm going to go back through the last 2 11-0 seed beads and out. You want to make sure your loop is big enough that you've made to go through your cup button or whatever clasp you're planning on using. From here, I'm going to do 2 more 11-0 seed beads because I went through the first or out the last 2, and I'm going to go back through all of these and reinforce the clasp. So I'm getting a second set of 2s right next to it. You always want to make sure whenever you have a closure or a clasp that you're doing at least 2 strands of thread through that area. Once you're out through that final loop, you're going to make sure to come back down through the 2 seed beads that you just added and out. From here, we're going to go back up the side. So you're going to grab your next tubelets, back up, and continue on with your pattern. When you get back to your 4mm gemstones, again, you're doing that right angle weave pattern to connect to the sides. Once you're all finished connecting those 2, we're going to go up to the original piece here and get ready just to tie off the threads. When you finish up your second side then, and you're coming out of your last 11-0, all you're going to do is sew into those 2 corner 2mm beads. I'm going to sew through the 11 and out through the tubelet. When I come out through the tubelet, I'm going to keep my needle and thread attached to it, take my needle and thread toward the back of the design, and I'm also going to take my starter thread and push that toward the back of the design. Now remember, the starter thread is already tied into a knot, so you don't have to worry about that one. You're just going to tie these 2 thread ends together toward the back again so you don't see it. And then once you have those 2 thread ends together, I'm going to keep the original thread end right there, take my thread and needle, and I'm going to go up through the design into the netting a little bit along the back of the cap, or the back of the crystal rather. Pull my knot toward there and burn off my extra thread. That's going to finish up my Polaris bracelet, which can be done with so many different materials. I can't wait to see it. Comment below, please let me know what changes you're going to make if you're doing it as a set. Also, I'd love to see this with some pearls in the middle and also with some 2mm gemstones. It would look absolutely beautiful. Once you have any extra threads, you can burn them down. I always usually have a connection thread because I use a little bit less when I'm teaching. That way you don't have to watch me pull through as much thread. There you have then your Polaris bracelet. Again, it's a really cool component that you can look at and see if you want to do it as a set of earrings. If you do need a little bit less length, you can always end with the right angle weave or just take out a tubelet, 1 on each side. You can see how it fits on me here, and I have about a 6 1/4 inch wrist. So if you have a standard wrist, you should be good to go with that same fitting and that same size. And it's just a really, really pretty bracelet. It would also look lovely if you want to use some of your extra supplies to make it into a lovely and beautiful choker that you can wear as well. As always, thanks so much for joining me and making Anna's Polaris bracelet. Remember, if you need any materials, want to check out the best box, look at the links below to shop with us online. If you haven't already, also check out and subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Remember to comment below to help build the community, ask any questions that you may have, answer some questions that you may have had but figured out, as well as give details to any alterations that you have made to the pattern. It really helps to build this amazing community when you become engaged. As always, thank you so much. Enjoy your box and enjoy the new Polaris bracelet.